Hello, welcome to Mr. MathWell here. We're going to graph a secant graph. Okay, this is a bit of a tricky one because you notice on your calculator, if you get your calculator out, you don't have a secant function on your calculator. I don't know if you notice that. You have sine, cos, and tan, and you have inverse sine, inverse cos, inverse tan. Now, secant is 1 over cosine. Okay, so when we're graphing, when you're trying to find values of secants, you have to do on your calculator, if you're calculating a value, 1 over cosine for secant. Cosecant is 1 divided by sine, and so on. So when we graph, we have to think of this in terms of cosine. So this part right here is the secant part. Okay, now I'm going to leave that -1 or that -1 because that's a translation, so I want to focus on the actual trig part first. So when I rewrite this, when we think about this, it's going to be 1 divided by cosine of this, and this x minus pi over 2 is all part of that cosine function, so that all has to be in the denominator there as well. And so we're going to have a -1 at the end. So what we're going to do to graph is we're going to take a look at a cos graph first, then we're going to shift the cos graph to the right, pi over 2 units, then we're going to take the inverse of that, that's the 1 over, the reciprocal, I should say, the reciprocal of that, and then we'll move that down 1 unit. That's how we're going to graph it. So let's put the original cos, like just y equals cos x, let's do that in red. So y equals cos x kind of looks like this, right? This is the shape, starts at 1, goes down to -1, and then comes back up and hits 1 again at 2 pi. Okay, so there's 2 pi, here's pi, and this is pi over 2, and so on, okay? 3 pi over 2. Okay, so we've got that. Now, if we shift it, this means shifting to the right and pi over 2 units. So let's change color. Let's do a blue. And I'm going to shift all these points over. Here's pi over 2 units. So it starts at 1 there, and it's going to go down now through pi. I'm going to hit -1 at 3 pi over 2. Hit 0 at 2 pi. Oh, goodness. I'm not sure why my computer's doing this these days, but it's done this a few times. Okay. Let's pick that up again. Hey, life throws you some curveballs sometimes. So shift over pi over 2 units, we said was right here. Okay. Pi over 2 units looks something like this. I don't have all of my things on there, but whatever. Oops. Up to there. Okay, so this was 2 pi. All right. This was pi here, and so on. Okay. Now, that's this part of the cos graph. Now we got to do the reciprocal. Now, in doing the reciprocal, and I'll use gray here now, you do 1 over the y values, right? So 1 over 1 is 1. Okay, here's another 1 over 1. That's 1. Here's -1. 1 over -1 is -1. So those are my invariant points. So I'm just going to write those down, jot those down in the graph. 1 over 0 is undefined. So wherever the graph now is 0, okay, that has to be undefined. So I'm going to put a vertical asymptote there. And then, of course, where the graph approaches 0, the reciprocal would approach infinity. Where, again, the blue graph approaches 0 over here, the reciprocal approaches infinity. Where it approaches 0, approaches infinity. So this is just on the negative side. And again, over here, approaches 0, approaches infinity. Okay, so now we're focused on the gray graph here. That's what we've got so far. And that's taking care of this whole thing. And the final step is to look at the -1, and that just brings everything down, vertical translation, down 1. So the yellow, let's do black graph will be our final graph, okay? And so everything comes down 1, that point there. The asymptote stays the same. That doesn't move up or down. And so we got this. This comes down to -2, and we've got this. And this part right here, and then this also comes down to 0, and we've got this. Okay, so the black graph, as you can see, and of course you could keep writing. I just kind of did 1 period, but obviously, you know, this is going up like that and so on. So we have these kind of U-balls here, right, up and down. Now, just to confirm, I have graphed this on Desmos. So let's go over here, and you can plug in secant into Desmos. And so this looks very much like what we have, right? And I also graphed, because if you notice, one of the vertical asymptotes should be at pi. So I graphed x equals pi, a vertical line at pi. And if we zoom out here, this is what the graph looks like over repeated periods. That does look like the vertical asymptote. So again, we're looking pretty good here. This is 3 pi over 2 and negative 2. So these points are all looking pretty good, same as our graph. Okay, so that's how you graph secant. You got to focus on 1 divided by cos, and then go from there.